Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches, Chullin, Daf Tes Amud Beis, and as well Daf Yud. I know you got to the top line of Tes Amud Beis with Rabbi Handler. I am going to go back about 7 lines, so we're going to start at the bottom of Tes Amud Aleph. I have about 7 or 8 lines from the bottom. Kedeba Amine Rabbi Abba Me Rav Huna. It was just too much smack in the middle of the sugya. It's actually faster to learn the 7 lines of Gemara than it is to give the context. So we'll start at the bottom of Tes Amud Aleph, 8 lines or so from the bottom. Kedeba Amine Rabbi Abba Me Rav Huna. Let's say that a person did a shrita, and then Baze'ev, a wolf shows up, the Natal B'nei Me'ayim, and he steals the B'nai Me'ayim, bites onto them and runs away with them. That's mamish, a fine dinner for a wolf. That's good to go. So says the Gemara, well, if Natal Halesna, we have no way of assessing what happened, whether or not the animal was a treifa. We didn't have a chance to check it yet. That was the time we were looking at. It was after Shechita, but before we did all the bedikas to make sure the animal was kosher. Says the Gemara, Halesna, if it's not there, what are you supposed to do? Ella, it must be that Naka B'nai Me'ayim. No, he bit it and he left it there. So says the Gemara, if Nakav, if we watch the wolf do that, so we don't have to assume that the hole that we now see in the Bnei Me'ayim was there before, and therefore the animal's a treifa. No, I saw the animal went over and bit the same exact spot that he bites. There's holes. I don't have to assume the animal's a treifa. I can assume that we are good to go. So says the Gemara, Ella, what are we talking about? Well, says the Gemara, Natlan v'hichziran kshehin nekuvin mount. Let's say that the animal takes the B'nai Me'ayim and runs to his little cave, and then he brings it back. And then we see that there are teeth marks in it, or there are holes in the B'nai Me'ayim, in the intestines. So now we're a little bit more torn. Do we say that, okay, we know there are holes here, and it could be that it's from the fox or whatever. What animal? It's a wolf. Could be that it's from the wolf. Do we have to assume that in the exact spot where the animal bit there were pre-existing holes? How far do we go in regards to the concerns of an animal being a treifa? So Amarle, no, that's way too far. Ein choshishin shema b'makom nekev nokav. I don't have to worry about that. So therefore, just to answer this question, we're going to question it in a moment, but to answer this question is that if an animal was shechted and the b'nei me'ayim, the innards, the intestines have been removed, comes along a wolf and grabs them and runs away and then brings them back for whatever reason, and we see a hole in the intestines, do we assume that in that hole where the wolf bit, that there was already a hole, and therefore the animal's a treifa because it had a pre-existing hole? An animal that has a hole in its intestines is a treifa, not kosher. Or Dilma, or would we say that no, we don't have to worry about that at all? It's too far. So the Gemara says we're not worried about that. And I think kind of emotionally we all agree with that. Like, you find teeth marks, you have to assume there was a neck of there. It's such a far-fetched concern. Says the Gemara, how far-fetched is it? I'll bring you a raya that we actually are concerned. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom, Esvei. We have a Mishnah, a Tosefta, I should say, from Trumos. Ra'at sipor hamenaker b'te'ena. If you see a bird who is pecking a te'ena, a fig, or ve'achbar hamenaker ba'avtichin, you have a mouse that is kind of gnawing at a melon of sorts. Says the Gemara, what do we see over here? Choshishin shema b'makom nekev nakav. We have to assume that there was a snake bite right there. We are concerned. It's an unbelievable thing. So this is our stira. Our case that we started with wanted to know if the wolf bites on the intestines covered over a pre-existing hole. We said we're not worried. Over here, when it comes to the venom that we're concerned about, Rashi says on the top, Shema b'makom nekev shel nachash nakav v'asim shum sakanas nefashos. So if I see a fig and I see a bird poking at the fig, I have to be concerned that the hole where he poked was where a snake bit, and therefore I'm concerned. I'm not allowed to. So that's a stira. That's a stira. In one case, we're choshesh that underneath that bite mark is a pre-existing bite mark, and in one case, we don't say that. Says the Gemara on the top of the page, Amar le mikamedame sisur sakanta sakana shiny. Yeah, what? These things are not equivalent. When we're dealing with a case of sakana, and there's a chance, an odd chance, but there's a chance that a snake left its venom. So even though it's a very unlikely possibility, but chamira sakanta me isura, we're more concerned about the danger of venom being inside this fruit or vegetable, and therefore we're going to be machmer. Masha Einkin, in our case of regular treifa stuff, we're not concerned. No one's going to die from eating a treifa. The element of suffix is very, very low. And we know this principle, we've seen it before in Shas, of chamira sakanta me isura, is that we're more strict when it comes to things that are dangerous than things that are usr. Says the Gemara, and it should be Amar Rava, because this conversation that we've been having so far, if you were watching carefully, was between Rabbi Abba and Rav Huna. But Rava never met Rav Huna. So it's impossible to say Amar Le. That, in fact, is the footnote on the side, Os Katan Aleph in Agos V'Tzionim. It says Bekis Veyad. It doesn't say Amar Le Rava. It says Amar Rava. The Tevas Le Lesa. The word Le is not there. V'chein hu nachon. De Rava lo ra'a es Rav Huna. Kemasha kosav atosos bebechoros yodal amalal dikduk sofer. This is like my happy place. This is like just getting this clarity of when everybody lived. Rav Huna never met Rava. Rava never met Rav Huna. Rav Huna was too early. Just they didn't overlap. So back in the Gemara, Omar Rava Maishna suffix sakanta l'chumra suffix isur nami l'chumra. Why does it have to be that one? We weren't even comparing them to say that one was better than the other. Why don't we just say that it's usr? Why did we have to say that it was lenient? We should have said that even by the isr, that it's also chamur. Why? Like that was our case that we started with. The ze'ev took the intestines. It came back with bite marks. You're right. You're right. We should be concerned about venom from a snake. We should also be concerned about an isser. So why are we being makel? Says the Gemara, Marlei Abaye, below shiny beini sur sakanta. You don't distinguish Rava. Abaye said to Rava, how could you not distinguish between isser and sakanta? Of course we do. After all, ilu we know from the Mishnah and Taras that Safek Tuma Birshus Harabim Sveko Tahor, Safek Mayim Megulim Asurim. Look at this. Here we see Tuma, not Isser per se, but Tuma and Sakana are compared. When it comes to Tuma Birshus Harabim, we know Sveko Tahor. We learned this in Maseches Sota. That's where we draw this principle out of, that a Safek Tuma Birshus Harabim, no problem at all. When it comes to Tuma, we can be Mekel. But the Ilu Safek Mayim Megulim, but when it comes to a suffix of water that's been revealed, and we know the underlying concern of that is that maybe a nachash left its venom in the liquid, asurin. So Abaye pushes back on Rava and says, "What are you talking about? We know that chamira sakanta me isura. What kind of picture are you trying to paint?" Omar Le says Rava back to Abaye, "You've misunderstood Abaye. You misunderstood. Listen." Says the Gemara Hasam, when we said that Safek Tuma Birshus Harabim Sveikota or Hasam Hilchaso Gmiri Lamisota, there, that was a drasha. That was something that we learned as a tradition from Sota land. Says the Gemara 8 lines down or so on Tesamid base. Masota Birshus Hayachid Aftuma Birshus Hayachid. We know that when it comes to a sota, when are we concerned about kinui, when they've been alone, all right? So that's only when it's a rishus hayachid. So says the Gemara, aftuma b'rishus hayachid, we extend that over there. That's the only time that there's a concern. When are we not concerned? B'rishus harabim, we're just not concerned. However, when it comes to mayim megulim, we are concerned. I've gone to visit in the past Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and if you've ever watched him, he keeps a piece of paper on top of his drink, just like this. Every time he finishes drinking, he'll take a sip, he'll take a little piece of paper, and he'll put it on top of this from these Gemaras. Yeah, that's the greats, the people who know. Yeah, the people who know. And we'll see in a minute what the measure is, like how long should it be not revealed. That's why he does it. We're going to see a very rigid measure, which is actually according to Shachar. We should be more makbid. We should be, even though snakes are not common. And we'll even see that our concern in our case is that the snake is like under the handle. We'll see soon what that is. So that's why he does this. He takes a sip. It's a very short period of time. So he covers his drink. Nobody does that. We should probably do it. I don't know. I'm not opposed to it. Says the Gemara, that's why Abaye doesn't like Rava's answer. Anyways, the Gemara says, Masiv Rav Simi. Rav Simi has a question. Let's say that we're indoors. Rishus hayachid. Sheretz b'fi chulda. There's a chulda that has a sheretz, one of the shratim that are metame, in its mouth. The chulda mehaleches al gabe kikaro shel truma. Very bad combination. That you have the chulda carrying a sheretz, walking over holy tuma breads. So first of all, call the exterminator, and second of all, you're probably in big trouble. So says the Gemara, Safek naga, Safek lo naga, svekotar. If there is an unclear element of whether or not there was a negia, a contact between the sheretz that is metame and the truma, the halacha is that we're mekel its tar. However, v'ilu Safek mayim megulem, when it comes to mayim megulem, we see that it's aser. So here we see a very strong, stark shita, not like Rava tried to present at the top of the page of Maishna between Safek Sakanta and Safek Yisr. We should be machmer on both. Here we see that there is a distinction between Tuma or Isr on the one side and Sakanta on the other. So therefore we would say Sakanta as a Chamura Sakanta Meisura. Says the Gemara, I can answer up for that. Ha'asamnami, Rava would say, Hilchasa Gemiri Lami Sota. There too we have a din that we draw from Sota. Now, what we're going to be doing is parsing something that we really haven't parsed in many years. We know that when there's a Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid, we're Makbid. When there's a Safek Tuma Birshus HaRabim, we're Mekel. However, the Gemara is now going to split a hair. When we say that there's a Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid, that it's Aser, it's only under a specific circumstance. Says the Gemara, Masota davar sheyesh ba das lishael. When we say that there's a Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid, that's when we can ask the woman, were you alone with him? Were you together with him? Afhacha, so too in our case, where we have a Safek Naga, Safek Lo Naga, so we would say the same thing. Davar sheyesh ba das lishael. It's only true that Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid is when you can ask. What are you going to do? You're going to ask the Chulda if the sheretz touched the Truma? No. Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid is only aser, is if there's a way to clarify. If there's no way to clarify, then Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid is just like Rishus HaRabim and his mutter. I didn't remember this thing. It's so dark, it's so fine. So again, let's just paint this tree. Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid generally is aser. Safek Tuma Birshus HaRabim generally mutter. Good. Now Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid split. When do we say that that's going to be asr? Only when there's kedei lishael, when I can clarify it. But when I can't, I can't. So Rava is still holding stark. You can't bring a raya from there. That doesn't teach me that chamura sakanta meisura in general, broad. So you can't say that. In this case, we have a ukimta. It says the Gemara, 5-6 lines from the bottom. Amar Ravashi toshma. Tzluchis shehinicha megula. Let's say that we have mechatas and it was left uncovered. Uba umitzah mechusa. So I have my mechatas, it's water. We should not be leaving it uncovered. So says the Gemara, if I left it uncovered, and now I find it covered, halacha is tmeya. Why is it tmeya? She'ani omer, what's my concern? Adam tame nichnas l'sham v'kisa. It's like the laws of entropy and enthalpy. When things get messy, you need energy to clarify and clean. All of a sudden, the cap is back on top. Somebody put it there. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an animal. Someone who has das put it there. So the Gemara says, I'm concerned that person has das. The laws of entropy do not indicate that the pot that was off would go back on. It wouldn't work. It says the Gemara, let's say that I left the mechatas covered, magula, and then I find it uncovered. No, that's normal. That's we expect things to get messier. So therefore, that case is different. If a chulda could drink from those now revealed waters, or if a snake could drink from those now revealed waters, so says the Gemara, what's the reason why we are concerned about the chulda and the nachash? I just got new garbage cans in my backyard 2 weeks ago. Guess what the rats have done? They chewed right through them already. Oh, you're a bit of an expert.
They don't toughen them up.
They should make them laden with poison. No one else is going to eat them. I did. This is new Torah you've taught me today.
You could have a long talk about
it
someday if you'd like.
I don't think I want to, actually.
I don't think so either.
I love you like a brother, but I would rather talk about Torah. No, we're good. We're good. So says the Gemara, that's darkan shel shratzim legalos, ve'ein darkan lechasos. So the Gemara makes these distinctions that when it comes to uncovered to covered, it's tameh. When it comes from covered to uncovered, it's puzzle. There are different distinctions in language. On the front end, when it's from uncovered to covered, we know that there was someone who did that. We're concerned that they're tameh. When it's animals, we're concerned that they made it puzzle. Says the Gemara, skip the parentheses, V'ilu safek mayim megulin asurin. No matter how you cut it, a suffix of mayim megulin is going to be asur. So all of this is Rav Ashi teaching us the following: Shma mina chamira sakanta meisura shma mina. Abaye and Rava had it out. Abaye wanted to say, of course it's chamira sakanta meisura. Rava's like lav dafka because the mari mekomos that you're bringing me are mari mekomos that I can say are just based on ukimta. That case is different because it was Safek Tuma Birshus HaYachid when it wasn't Kedei Lisha. So Rava had all of these ways to wriggle out of the problem. Says Rav Ashi, there's no wriggling out of anything. We hold in halacha that Chamira Sakanta Meisura Shmamina. Says the Gemara 7-8 lines down on Yud Amud Aleph. Tanan Hasam, we have a Mishnah Maseches Trumos. Gimel mashkin asurin mishum gilui. There are 3 liquids. I feel like my drink should not be uncovered while we're talking about this. I feel very guilty.
We didn't see any snakes.
What?
We didn't see any snakes.
Doesn't matter if you see snakes. Rav Chaim Kanievsky didn't have snakes in his room either. So says the Gemara as follows. There are 3 liquids we're concerned about. Mayim, v'yayin, v'cholav. I did a bris in the old Makor long time ago. How long have we been in this building? I'm a very OCD, so I set up the whole bris. I poured the cup of wine during Chazar Sashatz. Rabbi Ephraim Friedman, Gedarko Bakodesh, came over to me and said, you should not do that. You should pour it right before the bris. It's this Gemara Mamish. I'm Aretz. So he says, Mayim v'yayin v'chalav. Kama yishu v'hu asurim. How long does one have to wait before the mayim megulim concern triggers, and therefore you should no longer drink it because it's dangerous? So that the rachash, in this case we're talking about a snake, that the rachash, Rashi says, is 2/3, 3/4 of the way down. Harachash, hanachash, they're spelled almost the same. A rachash is a quiet animal, I think. Anyways, the Gemara says, if it comes from a makom karov, the yishted, that it has the opportunity to drink, so that's how long it is. Again, we don't have a time frame, but it sounds like it's very short. The kama makom karov, how long is this? Amar Rav Yitzchak Berei, Rav Yehuda K'dei mitachas ozen kli v'yishted. If it comes out from under the handle of the kli, Rashi, choshishin shema hayasham sheretz v'shasa, then maybe there was some kind of animal there. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? All he has to do is yishtet. If he just finishes drinking, I'm going to still see him standing there, which means I don't have to worry about that because that amount of time is only half of his travels. The snake comes out, sticks its head in the cup and drinks, leaves some venom behind. But if you say that that's the zman, that's the shiur, I'll still see the snake sitting there. So says the Gemara, you're 100% right. Rather, what should it be? It has to be enough time where an animal is close by, a snake is close by, there's a hole, whatever the case may be. The animal has to have enough time to climb out, drink and leave some venom, and then go back to where he is, and that is going to be the amount of time that we are concerned about. Really fascinating Gemara. Rashi, 2 lines before the wide line, so kachazile, kevan shalosh shah l'sham hanacha shir sheyachol lachzor l'choro, like the sheyuchol lav l'ishtos havale lo asa. The asa kachazile b'chazarasa l'choro tachas ozen akli b'karka. I would have seen everything. Got to make the shiur reasonable. So therefore the shiur is, and it's not to find any more in the Gemara, but it's very clear from what's found on the side over here that this is quoted in the Rambam, and there are also elements of this that are quoted in Yoredeya. I wanted to look it up before shiur started, but I didn't have time, so we'll have to look it up after. That brings us to the 2 dots, a quarter of the way down on Yud Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Itmar, hashochet besakin, a person does a shchita, and then later v'nimtzeis peguma. Before you started, the shchita knife was perfect, but then let's say you did the shchita, you did an hour of shchita, and then you look at the knife and you see that there's a pegam, you see that there's a nick in the knife. So what do we do? Do we say that we assume that the pigam happened very early on and all the subsequent animals are treif? Or do we say that no, it probably didn't happen early on, and at least some, if not most, of the animals are kosher? This is a machlokes amorim amar Rav Huna. Afilu shiber es atzamos kol hayom. Even if after the shchitas that you did, you took the knife and all of a sudden you took your delicate shchita knife and you started chopping things with it, which is of course going to cause a nick. All of them are psula. Chayshin and Shema Be'or Nifkama. Says Rav Huna, very makbid, we're concerned that when the shochet took the knife and ran it over the outer layer of skin, that the outer layer of skin was thick enough that it caused for a nick, and therefore even the first animal that he shechted is treif. Not allowed. Puzzle. So says Rav Chizda, I totally disagree. Rav Chizda Amar Kshera. It's completely kosher. Why? Because Shema Be'etzem Nifkama. Let's talk about how one does shchita. A little graphic, you'll excuse me, but we're learning a graphic Masechta. The animal's neck is, he's looking up at the ceiling. So the neck that's revealed where I'm cutting over here, I see the top side of the neck. The kana and the veshet, the fleshy part, are on the top. The spine is at the bottom. So you take your knife, and you're holding the handle properly, you make your bracha, you're doing the shchita, the simanim are cut, and then it's possible that after you cut through both simanim, now the animal's kosher, then your knife hits the spine. Flow of events is that the animal became kosher with the shchita of rov of both simanim. Only after the fact was there the nicking of the knife on the spine. So Rav Chizda says that's a more reasonable option than saying that the skin caused the damage. And therefore, we assume that that first animal that you shechted is kosher. Now, according to him, subsequent animals probably wouldn't be kosher. But let's see how this plays out. Now the Gemara is going to explain both of their shitas as follows. Bishlama Rav Huna Kishmaite. Rav Huna actually follows the shita that he said on the previous page in his discussion that he had on the bottom of Testament Aleph, that discussion that we had. We're not going to go back to that now, but Rav Huna is good to go. El Rav Chizda, I don't understand my time. How could he be Mekel? So Amar Lach, says Rav Chizda, what do you mean? I have a very easy Shas principle to share with you as to why I would say that it's mutter if I know that I started with a kosher animal and a kosher knife, and I ended up having a non-kosher knife. Says the Gemara, Amar Lach, what would Rav Chizda argue? Etzem vaday pogem. When I take a knife and I cut a piece of bone with it, oh, for sure, those knives are going to be nicked. No question. Even the scalpels that I use that are hardened and they can get nicked. I'm cutting very soft, fleshy skin. It's easy. But if you cut anything else, it could easily nick. The knives they had, there's no way they even compare remotely to the quality of the knives that we have. They're probably 1,000 times better now than they were then, whatever the number is. Such harder metal. We have alloys. We have hardening. No question about it. So says the Gemara, says Rav Chizda, Pashat, that if you were to take one of their very flimsy blades and you're going to cut a bone, obviously it's going to ruin the blade. Or when it comes to skin, suffik pogem, suffik lo pogem. Therefore, have a suffik v'vadai. And Rav Chizda says, ve'ein suffik motzi midei vadai. This is such an important principle in Shas. We've spoken about this in the Bavas a little bit, and it really applies everywhere. It applies in Yoredei, sugis like the ones we're learning now, is that if I have to make a decision, and one factor is a suffix, and one factor is a vadai, one factor is a doubt, one factor is for sure, the suffix cannot override the for sure. So what are Rav Huna and Rav Chizda talking about? I had a perfect blade, I did a shchita, now I have an imperfect blade. So Rav Huna is like, maybe it was the skin. Rav Chizda is like, it's more likely the bone, because bone and blade are not a good combo. Skin and blade are probably fine. So Rav Chizda says, "Ein suffik motzi midei vadai." You can't. He's pushing you got it backwards. That's not a normal svara. We shouldn't be concerned about the skin. That's what the Gemara says. Then the Gemara says, about halfway down on Yudam and Aleph, Masiv Rava l'siyua Rav Huna. He brings a raya for Rav Huna. Let's remind ourselves that Rav Huna was the machmir to say that the or that the skin might have caused the nick in the blade, and therefore even the first animal is not kosher if you started with a good blade and it ended up being bad. What does the Brisa say? This is a Mishnah actually, and it's about mikvah. We've actually seen this Mishnah many times. Taval, person goes to the mikvah. V'Allah, he comes out of the mikvah. V'nimtza Allah of davar hachotzetz. And at a later point, not right when he was standing there, but 2, 3, 4 hours later, he found paint on him. So says the Gemara, Afal pi shenis asek be'osa min kol hayom, even if after he goes to the mikvah, he painted a whole house, and now we see that he has paint on his hand. So says the Gemara, lo also lo tefillah. His tefillah is not kosher. Ad sheyomar bari li shelo haya alai kodem lechein. His tefillah is no good. Tefillah is no good unless he promises that he was told that he hadn't painted for weeks, whatever the svara is that he said. Says the Gemara, v'hahacha, I don't understand. Why would you say that he has to add a barili? He should have been mutter anyways. Why? Because v'hacha devadai toval and suffik have alei, suffik lo have alei, v'ka'asi suffik umotzi midei vadai. Look at what the Mishnah said. This guy jumps in the mikvah, and then he goes and paints a house. Guess what he's going to find all over his body? Paint. Says the Gemara, you're not kosher unless you verbally state. Why do you have to verbally state anything? If you want to say that ein suffik motzi midei vadai, well, the vadai is that you went to the mikvah. The suffik is that you had a chatzitza. If ein suffik motzi midei vadai is true, then why do we have to add a barili? Elamai, it must be that Rav Huna is right. That's the svara that the Gemara gives. So the Gemara responds to this, shiny hasam. The ikla memar he'emad tame al ches kaso ve'ema lo taval. Says the Gemara, no. When it comes to the guy who went to the mikvah, what was his status before he went to the mikvah? He was tameh. So the chezkas tuma prevails, and we just assume ve'ema lo taval, that he didn't go to the mikvah. We're going to question this because it says v'taval. That's what the Mishnah says. We'll question this soon. But the Gemara in its Havamina here is framing out a scenario where it really isn't a case of Safek Motzi Midei Vadai. We had a Chazaka, and the Vadai was removed. So says the Gemara, well then, if that's true, Hachanami, Ha'emad Behem al Chazkaso, Ve'emar lo nishchata. According to that, frankly, ridiculous rationale, then say the animal starts out not kosher. It's whatever. Aver minachai. The animal's it's not kosher until it gets shechted. So it says the Gemara, you can't say that. There's a dead animal in front of you. I know it was shechted. Says the Gemara, yeah. The Mishnah says he went to the mikvah. You want to say we need to start with the havamina, with the chazaka, whatever they were doing. The man was tummy before the mikvah. The animal was usher before the shechah. Maskim, it's true, but you removed what were the givens in the case. This is like geometry. You get givens before you start. Stop questioning the givens. You just said he didn't go to the mikvah. Yes, he did. He didn't get shchita. Haresh shchuta lefanecha. So the Gemara says, no, it's different. When the person in the mikvah was clean, and now afterwards he's not clean, we have a reisa. A reisa is something that ruins a chazaka, ruins something that precedes it. So now we see that there is some kind of chatzitza. So the Gemara says that there is a reisa. Says the Gemara, yeah, there's a reisa here too. Hachanami, by the animal that we shechted. Isilida bareisa. Go look at the knife. There's a big gap in the knife. There's a nick. So says the Gemara, Sakin Israel, Behema lo Israel. You're right. The Gemara doesn't fully flesh this out, but I'll add in what's missing. When it comes to the animal and the shechita, it's not the animal that has a reisa. It's the knife that has a reisa. The animal, we don't see anything wrong with him. There's nothing evident in the animal that there was a problem. The knife, an external factor, has a reisa. But what about the guy in the mikvah? The reisa is on him, not an external factor. It's a beautiful distinction. You can't compare these cases because to compare them would mean to say that the reisa is on the direct subject. The reisa is not on the subject of the behema. It's on the thing that did the shechita. Masha'en came by the chatzitza case, the reisa is on the gavra himself. And therefore, you cannot bring a raya one way or the other to this source that you're trying to bring to support Rav Huna. Let's try another question. 3, 4, 10 lines from the bottom of the page, a little bit less on Yoram and Aleph. Meisvei, We have a brisa, says the Gemara. Let's say a person was shachar es haveshet. So a person, they cut the esophagus. Ve'achar kach nishmata hagargeres. Gargeres is the Gemara's terminology, in the Tanaim at least, for the kane, for the windpipe, or the trachea. So gargeres and kane are synonyms. So let's say that a shochet does the shchita, and I should just add here that we're talking about a bird, because there's a very important distinction. I have said this once before, but I'm going to say it again, and as many times as is needed. When we talk about larger animals, the halacha is that to make it a kosher animal, you have to shecht rove of both simanim. By birds, you only have to shecht rove of one siman. So now let's look at this case of a bird. This is a Gemara found later on in this Masechta. We'll learn it in a couple of weeks. Shachar es haveshet. If you cut the esophagus fully, guess what happens now? The animal's kosher. And then ve'achar kach nishmatu hagar geres. Then we see that there's a flaw. There's a problem with the kana. It doesn't matter. Kshera. But what if the shchita happened second and the nishmata happened first? Let's say nishmata agar geres, that the kana, the windpipe, the trachea dislodges, and ve'achar kach shachar esaveshet pasha, that's going to be psula, obviously, because the simanim, there's something wrong with that animal. That's not normal. Neither of these cases are the cases that we need right now. Let's look at our case. The brisa continues. Shachar es haveshet v'nimtzei skar hagar geres shmuta. Let's say that a person shechted the esophagus, rove, animal should be kosher, but he also found that the gargeres, that the trachea was dislodged, but he doesn't know the seder hadvarim. Ve'eno yodea im kodem shchita nishmata im la'achar shchita nishmata. He's not sure of the order. Did he shecht first, or did the siman dislodge first? We don't know. So says the Gemara, Zehaya Maisa. This actually came up halacha l'maisa. This was a real shiloh that was presented. Let's just get the case clear. It's a bird. He shechted one siman, the other siman dislodged, and he doesn't know the order of which one came first. If we knew the order, we could paskin clearly based on the earlier parts of the source. We don't know. Says the Gemara of the Amra, what was the answer? Kol safek b'shchita pasal. Anytime we ever have an element of doubt, the halacha is that it's pasal. Says the Gemara, Kol Safek B'Shchita La'asuye Mai. Says the Gemara, what are we talking about? What is this case of Kol Safek? Every time we see Kol, my brother Howard said to me today, that when he's teaching Daf Yomi now, he said whenever he sees a cloud like this, he calls it out to the room. Every time we see Kol X in a Brisa or a Mishnah, we know what's coming. HaKol La'asuye Mai. So the Gemara said, the Gemara says, "Kol safek b'shchita le'isuye mai, lav le'isuye ki agavna." Our case where the knife is problematic, and therefore we should say that kol safek b'shchita is going to be psula, and therefore we paskin like Rav Huna, and we don't paskin like Rav Chizda. Says the Gemara, lo. Why would you say that the kol is to include our case? Maybe the kol is to include another case. La'asuye safek shah safek daras. Maybe there's an element of safek of he paused in the cutting, or safek of daras if he pressed down too hard, and the severing of the simanim happened not due to the sharpness of the blade, but due to the pressure, the downward pressure. Maybe that's the safek we're talking about. Top of Daf Yud Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Umayshno, I don't understand. What's the difference between any of these cases? They're both sveikos. That's what Rashi says. Ha-safek v'ha-safek. Says the Gemara, no. The cases are not the same. Ha-sam isilidba reyasa b'mehema. That's not true. In the case that we just saw at the bottom of the page, we saw that there was a dislodged siman. And therefore, in that case, the reyasa, the flaw is in the subject of the case, the animal itself. But in our case, like we said earlier, what's the focal point of the flaw? Where's the reyasa? Is it on the animal? No, the animal passes every test. It's on the knife. So no, we don't have a raya. So we tried to bring Marimekomos against Rav Chizda. In both cases, we shut them both down because, broadly, this applies to both cases. What we see as the reason as to why the two questions of the Gemara that tried to support Rav Huna, why they fell away, is because we have to be focused on where the reisa is. If the reis is on the subject, then I agree with you. But our case, where Rav Chizda was makil to say that even though the blade was perfect before, and now the blade is bad, the first one's kosher. Afal pikein still because the problem wasn't the animal, the problem was the sakin. So then the Gemara says, how do we paskin? If the shochet knows that he cut no bones with this blade, so then we say that we follow Rav Huna. We need a cause for assuming that something happened. So according to Rav Chizda, if I know that I nicked that blade on, let's say, the spine after I cut through both simanim, so then, okay, we paskin like Rav Chizda that we can be makil, but without that, we don't paskin like him. Says the Gemara on the Hilchasa, Michlal the Rav Chizda afal gav de lo shiber ba'etzem. That leaves an implication. The implication that it leaves is that, according to Rav Chizda, even if there wasn't an event that brought about damage to the knife, he would still say that the earlier versions of the animal, the earlier chatichas, the earlier shchitas were kosher. Says the Gemara, but then ela b'mai ifkim. I understand if you want to say like Rav Chizda that the knife dropped, I cut a bone, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention. I could understand, but Rav Chizda, again, you need something to work against the concern of the or. How can you say that the first animal is kosher if you know that the sakin never touched a bone? So says the Gemara, Hava Uvda, the Toraf Bar of Yosef ad Tlesar Chiyusa. There was a case scenario. Oh, sorry, I skipped a line. Ela b'mai ifkam, says the Gemara, it must be ema be'etzem de mafrekes ifkam. Even according to that shita of Rav Chizda, there's an assumption that when you were cutting, you cut too deep, you cut through the kana and the veshet, you cut through the windpipe and the esophagus, and you kept going, and the blade obviously must have hit the spine in the back. Good. The Gemara tells a quick story. We're going to have to stop in time for the 9:30 Mariv. Hava uvda v'taraf Rav Yosef ad tlesar chivsa. There was a case scenario where where the knife started out good, the knife ended up bad, and he ruined 13 animals. So says the Gemara, Keman, who is that like? Maybe we should say it's Kirav Huna, ve'afilu bekamaisa. Maybe we should say it's like Rav Huna, and it's even the first animal, and perhaps it was because of the or. Says the Gemara, no, lo. Kirav Chizda ulavar mikamaisa. Maybe he ruined all of them except for the first one. V'yibaisema, another possibility of this case of Rav Yosef, v'yibaisema la'olam Kirav Huna. The Ikar of Chizda, if it was to have been Rav Chizda, then we have a problem. Michti, mitla talinan. We need something to lean upon. Mimai de be'etzem mafrekes de kamaisa ifkim. Dilma be'etzem de mafrekes basraisa de basraisa ifkim. I understand you're making an assumption with Rav Chizda that he must have the knife must have hit the spine. I understand. What I don't understand is how you know which animal it hit. So therefore, because Rav Chizda has a certain latitude and a certain assumption that we know that it hit a bone somewhere, we just don't know where, then Rav Yosef wouldn't have answered all 13 of them. And therefore, it must be that it is like Rav Huna. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down, Omar le Rav Acha berei de Rava le Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha says to Rav Ashi, Rav Kahana matzrich bedikusa ben kol chada v'chada. He obligated the shochet to show the shchita knife to check the shchita knife between every shchita. We haven't yet learned this in this Masechta, but we do know from previous learning that they would check the blade on their fingernails for nicks, and they check it on their flesh from the side of the blade to see if there was any metals protruding off the side. Keman, who is this shita like that requires between each shchita that the blade must be checked? Says the Gemara, obviously it's Kirav Huna, Lemifsal Kamaisa. It must be that it's like Rav Huna. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Rav Chizda wouldn't require you to check it between each one. It only makes sense according to Rav Huna. Says the Gemara, lo, I could argue another way. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down. Kirav Chizda, ulach shure basraisa. No. We're saying that he does have to check it, and what that does is it makes sure that even the very last one that you do, even if it ends up being that the blade does have a nick, Rav Chizda would still be makel, because we assumed that it was on the mafrekes, on the spine of that last animal.
Can we examine the spines? See which one is nicked?
That's a very good question. I think the answer is that you would not be able to tell because the blades that they had were so flimsy. Like I know that with the knives that we have, for sure you'd be able to tell, for sure. It's an assumption of the Gemara that you would not be able to tell. Otherwise, your question would have been baked into the Gemara itself. We can just look. If animals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were perfect, and 6 has a line in it, Pasha, we know that's true. So I'm react. Your question is excellent. I'm just reacting that the Gemara doesn't say it. It has to be that the blades weren't strong enough. So says the Gemara, if you want to say that we want to make sure for sure that the blade was perfect, then you need to have a chacham. Says the Gemara, don't worry. This is such a massive principle in regards to Hilchos Kashrus. If you go into the house of someone who is a frum yid, they keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, b'chulei, and they say, I'm certain this food is kosher, maspik. That's all we need. This is halacha l'maisa. I've spoken to Rabbanim in town who don't like eating at people's homes because people are not knowledgeable about stuff. But if you're knowledgeable and you say, I'm sure this is fine, I checked all the ingredients, so then fine. So I know some Rabbanim who don't eat at people's homes because they don't want to say yes to some and no to others. Fine. If that's true, says the Gemara, that Eid Echad is Ne'eman B'Isurin, then Yihachi Me'ikara Nami Lo. Then in the beginning, we shouldn't have to show it in the first case. I can just trust the shochet. Why do I have to go to a chacham? Says the Gemara, because the driver to send this to a chacham is not what you think. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo amru laharo sakin lachacham el mipnei kvodo shel chacham. The only reason why we do this is because we want to show the kavod of the chacham. We really could continue here, but this is the beginning of a very, very important sugya, and I don't want it to be truncated. So we're going to stop right here, halfway down on Yud Amud Beis, and Mirz Hashem will pick up tomorrow night. I will not be here Tuesday. I'm going to see if my brother can sub in. He will have already given the shiur, which will be very, very helpful.
No.
Yeah, now he's not saying no to me, so I mean he might actually. So, but Amir Hashem, I know Tuesday I won't be here. Rabbi Handler won't be available. We'll be at the same event. Let me see how far we get tomorrow, and then Amir Hashem, I'll ask my brother to cover for Tuesday. Wishing you all a beautiful night.